So the answer to this question is yes. Now, this is always going to send people crazy. I've done this before on my old social media, Simon316. Do come and give me a follow. Because when you say somebody is the GOAT, they say, how can they be the greatest of all time? You're forgetting about this person. Now, look, I know it's stupid. I know it's dumb. But that's just the 2024 world. Mostly, when we refer to someone as a GOAT, it's basically they are among the GOATs. So if you think Bret Hart is a GOAT, if you think Steve Austin is a GOAT, if you think The Rock is a GOAT, when you throw somebody else in there, they could also be the GOAT. And I get it. I understand. That's absolutely ridiculous. How does that make any sense? But that is the universe that we've created, and that's the one that I'm going to be living in today. Because when it comes to Samoa Joe, I just think he is flabbing brilliant. Like, seriously, man, what hasn't he done? And look how amazing his career has been. You can go back basically 20 years when he was smashing it in Ring of Honor and he was smashing it in TNA, and especially in Total Nonstop Action. That's when people started to realize. Go and listen to Kurt Angle when he talks about the first time he tangled with Samoa Joe. He's like, oh my gosh, this guy's amazing and he's so legitimate and he comes across like such a tough guy. And look, there's always going to be the odd match here and there that maybe wasn't as good as we'd hoped, or I don't know, he dropped the ball, whatever you want to call it, because that's just being a human being. You can't smash out the park every time. But when you take his complete body of work, it is almost unmatched. And he has just continued to do this under the radar to the point, again, we go back to TNA. He should have probably had a massive world championship run, and instead somebody decided he should be kidnapped by ninjas when one day he just came back and nobody told us where he had been. It is an unsolved mystery. But that's the point, though. If you want to come into my house right now and say, actually, Simon, I think he's been underutilized in many promotions, it's true. I would actually struggle to debate that with you because, again, I'm repeating myself. You have to forgive me, but I want to do the escalation thing. In TNA, should he have been the world champion? Absolutely. I mean, he kind of was a big deal in Ring of Honor, but Ring of Honor was a very different company then. But even when he eventually went to NXT and Ring of Honor, now, down at NXT, Triple H definitely smelt the sauce, right? And he turned into this absolute mega end-of-level boss. And when he got to WWE, I don't want to pretend that he didn't have a really great time. I mean, he main evented the Great Balls of Fire pay-per-view, I believe it was, with Brock Lesnar, and he absolutely whooped Brock Lesnar's ass. Now, you can argue that he should have won that match and become the champion. That was never going to happen because of how WWE does treat their product. But I'm not going to say it was like totally crap. I mean, when he debuted, he also kicked Seth Rollins' ass, and that was really good. So he was coming across like a killer. But it almost kind of felt like he was hitting that glass ceiling just because he wasn't a WWE guy. And I would hazard a guess that even when he was signed by AEW, no one ever thought he was going to be world champion. But once again, he is just so damn good at what he does. Eventually, I'm going to assume Tony Khan looked around and he was like, well, there's only one option for the next world champion after MJF, and it's the guy from Samoa that's called Joe. And that came out too in the usual news cycle. We didn't give the belt to Samoa Joe because MJF was injured, had to go away for a while. It was down on the booking plans and it was down on a piece of paper. And I think this is an amazing thing that happens to many wrestlers when they have been smashing it for a long time. All of a sudden, you get this newfound respect from the audience, so that when eventually you do get your due and you do get some kind of a championship, everybody understands it, and we too come together to go, yeah, that guy deserves the pat on the back. I mean, I'm recording this after the 10th of January 2024 Dynamite, and what did the fans do when Samoa Joe walked out in Daily's place? They started to chant, you deserve it. I understand that's kind of become a Pavlovian chant. It just comes out of people's mouths, but I do think there is a realness to that. As ever, Smo's like, don't you talk like that to me. I know what I deserve. Shut up.
I was destined for this, and in light of that, tonight, we make some changes.
He's also had a massive influence on the wrestling business too, though. Because if you do go back to what I think is widely regarded as one of the best TNA matches ever, when it was Christopher Daniels versus AJ Styles versus Samoa Joe, do you know who was inspired by that match to the point they got into wrestling? It was Will Ospreay. And I hazard a guess that if you do go and Google this right now, you will find loads of stories from other wrestlers, because they did a three-way, the likes that nobody was really seeing back then unless you were super into wrestling and you were covering it from across the globe. But in terms of American wrestling and what was being presented, it just blew people's brains. I do believe it was the only match in TNA that Dave Meltzer gave 5 stars. Now, I know star ratings don't matter, but it's just yet more evidence that it certainly did something and it got people's eyes to open. And now, when you're watching AEW, I don't know how old Samoa Joe is. I assume he's in his early to mid-40s. He comes across as just this dude. You're like, who's going to beat him? Who's actually going to step up to beat him? Because he just comes across like such a real dude. And that is massively important. And it actually ties into the future of AEW too, and how it feels like they're changing their booking. Because in his first promo, he was like, right, that's it. We're changing the championship structure now. If you want a title match, you got to have a good win-loss record, and you go and talk to the people in the back, and only then do you get the opportunity. And if you had anybody else do this, I think you would have run the risk of maybe being crapped on a little bit. But when Samoa Joe says it, you totally believe it. And why is that? Because Samoa Joe is one of the GOATs. Let's just go through some of his classics as well. We mentioned that three-way, which you absolutely have to go and see. But you also have the trio of matches I believe he did with CM Punk in Ring of Honor, which we can also tie into the modern Day, because I'm not going to get into the other nonsense that happened. Who walked out at the start of the All-In pay-per-view and hit a home run? It was CM Punk and Samoa Joe. Now, it always takes two to tango, but again, the constant to all of this is flipping Samoa Joe. You also had that amazing match and basically mini feud with Jay Briscoe in 2004 in Ring of Honor, which honestly, you can watch now and go, this could have happened yesterday. Either before or after that too, I can't remember the exact time frame. He did the same with Homicide, who's also been going for ages. He then tangled with Kenta Kobashi, and even Kenta Kobashi, one of the best wrestlers ever, was like, oh man, this Samoan dude, we should all be talking about him. Anytime he's tangled with Bryan Danielson, it's been wonderful too. And again, I know I'm repeating myself here. Please go and watch that first match he did with Kurt Angle in TNA. If they had been able to do that on a bigger stage, the world would have been so damn different. I don't want to skirt over the stuff he did in NXT either, because in many ways you could argue that was the best he was ever booked. Do you remember everything he did with Shinsuke Nakamura? Even when he had that Finn Balor match when one of them got busted open, I think it was Samoa Joe. It was Samoa Joe. And at the time, WWE didn't like blood, so they were trying to clean him up. He was just pushing him away. A lot of people said that didn't actually live up to their expectations, but I went back and watched it recently, mostly because I knew I was going to do this video. It still has an aura to it, because as soon as Joe walks to the ring, you're just like, man, this dude is going to flood people up. And that doesn't just happen. Like, I know I talked about the whole longevity thing, but you still get other wrestlers that have been in the game for a long time and they don't feel like this. For example, I don't know, I need to pick a name out of nowhere here. If Barry Horowitz turned up in All Elite Wrestling and became the champion, I don't think people are going to buy into it. But Samoa Joe has just left this pathway of decimation, even though he has lost a lot. Let's not forget, he lost to MJF when they fought the first time, but he never loses his credibility and he never loses the threat. And that's because of the way he presents himself and the way that he does promos. Honestly, I tell you this, go and find me a bad Samoa Joe promo from the last, I don't know, say 5, 6, maybe even 10 years. You'll be able to find one from the early 2000s he tried to figure out of his character. But the idea that he was able to do this while not quote unquote looking like a proper professional wrestler, as some idiots like to say, that's another hurdle he had to overcome, and he did it. And I think you could put him in the ring with anybody right now, and at the very least, you would get something that entertained everybody, because he's an entertaining guy. I think he has such a way to him as well, that there's every chance this AEW run turns out to be a traditional championship, right? Maybe it goes to Hangman Adam Page, and maybe it goes to Swerve Strickland. And if that is what Tony Khan has decided to do, and look, I hope it's not, I hope he can hold it for at least 6 months or something like that, he is yet somebody else that is going to be able to take it, because once again, he'll have a plan, he'll have an idea, he'll have a microphone a week later, and he won't lose any of his edge. And I'm not talking about Adam Copeland, another guy you could probably make world champion and people would totally understand it. But because Adam Copeland hit the same highs in WWE, it wouldn't feel the same. And ultimately, when I saw Samoa Joe with that brand new AEW World Championship over his shoulders, I just thought, this is the way. This is the right thing to do. And really, we took way too long to get here, because he should have been a WWE champion, and he should have been a TNA champion, and he should just be a champion of any promotion that he walks in. And right now, he's probably better than ever. And that is saying something, because we've already established, he has had one hell of a banger career. And I kind of feel like that's ingrained in his character as well. And also, his name is Samoa Joe. Now, I know you shouldn't go to non-wrestling fans to talk about this kind of stuff. But when I do bring him up, if somebody isn't watching AEW or isn't a WWE fan, they're like, he's called Samoa Joe. And even when people see him, they don't really get it. Now, very sadly, I've never taken this to the next level and actually shown said individuals a Samoa Joe match, but I think it would take around about 2.2 of them until they totally understood what the concept was. So this was basically just, 7, 8, 9 minutes of me wanting to throw love at Samoa Joe, which sounds absolutely terrible. And if YouTube hears that, I didn't mean it in the way it sounded. Please don't block my video. So yes, I'm absolutely throwing Samoa Joe into the GOAT category, and you can now argue this below. And just to make you even more mad, no, I probably wouldn't put him on my Mount Rushmore of professional wrestlers, but I've already told you how GOAT status works in 2024. Don't get mad at me. I didn't come up with it. And also right now, if you did put a gun to my head and you say, pick the GOATs that are still active in the ring as of January the 11th, I would actually put Samoa Joe in there. Because again, I just look forward to what he's going to do every single week. That's the point of wrestling. That's the point of a television show. If I'm watching someone going, I never want to see you again, something has gone terribly wrong. Now, what I would like you to do is go in the comments below and of course tell me how wrong I am. But also please do tell me who your current moment GOAT would be, if that's the right thing to say. Like the video, share the video and subscribe. There's a video on the screen right now, which is me getting thrown into thumbtacks from a recent wrestling match. You may want to see that. If you hate me especially, that will be good. Grillermind.com/Simon. Use code Simon to get 10% off. These are fitness supplements I use, and I think they're super duper good. Patreon.com/Simon316. Please do buy a t-shirt from Pro Wrestling Tees or Samson Athletics. Simon J. Miller on TikTok. Simon Miller on Cameo, and I do believe we had run the gambit with that. But again, shout out to Samoa Joe, who has had one of the best careers of all time, and I will die on that hill. If you take your first bump and then somebody flies eyes in and go, oh my gosh, you're going to do what Samoa Joe did. You'd be the happiest man or the happiest girl ever, because not everybody gets to tread those boards. That's because he is one of the best. Goodbye.